Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe Break on the program with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. I hope you had a great weekend. We had a great weekend. If you're new here, Mondays and Fridays is when we do a live show. Kerfefe Break, just talk about what's in the news, what's on our mind. It's not always what's in the news. Uh, Sometimes it's just what's on our mind. And for me, that's been gardening. Just came out of the garden, actually putting snail bait on a bunch of our flowers because we're learning that the snails are really bad this time of year. And I didn't know this, but they eat up all of your plants if you let them stay. And so we got this organic snail bait that we're trying. And then I had to put down more mulch. And I really love gardening so far. Even though historically I haven't been the best at it, I am committed. We are committed to having a great cottage garden here. So somebody after my last video on Friday, some people sent me some gardening channel recommendations. Send them in because I want to watch everything. We're watching how to build pergolas and obviously about pest control and things like that. So I appreciate the suggestions. If you are, so Jules says RIP snails. Sorry, snails, but yeah, they're eating, and you can actually see. I was out there pulling some of them off the flowers, and you could see the damage that they're doing. But yeah, so if you're a regular member, welcome back. And I should say up front before I forget, we have ways to support the show. If you like deprogrammed, the channel. Wednesday nights we have our pop culture show with me and Mystery Chris. Thursdays are interviews, and Mondays and Fridays we do the live and hang out. So if you like the show and want to support it, you can do so here at YouTube. You can get a YouTube membership, or you can support us at Locals or Patreon or Subscribestar. And I appreciate everyone who supports. Thank you so much. If you can't do that, you can also just hit like, share the video, leave a comment. Comments help so much with the algorithm. So thanks. Okay, so mostly what I've been thinking about is the garden and housework. Oh, and one other quick thing that we did this weekend. We had a beautiful Sunday yesterday until the second half of the day. Spent several hours up in the attic. If you're new to this channel and you don't know, my husband and I bought this old house that we're renovating, and there are some really beautiful parts of renovation and the kind of things you take pictures of and you're like, look at this, look at what we did, let's celebrate this accomplishment after all this work, with each room or what have you. But the gross parts of renovation that you don't take pictures of, we spent hours in the attic yesterday. For some reason, this old house, maybe it was when someone redid the roof before we moved in. There's just, our attic is just full of wood chips, big old pieces of wood, debris, all kinds of just gross stuff. Little rodents have been up there, and we have to clean it all out so that we can insulate before it gets too hot. And so we've bagged up, gosh, I don't know how many. Yesterday, 3 huge contractors bags full of stuff. It's filthy. You're crawling around up there in the dirt and the grossness, and you have little headlamps on that go off, and then you're completely in dark, and there's nails coming out of the ceiling, so if you stand up too quick, you nail yourself. So I'm complaining. I'm complaining about the gross parts. But yeah, that's what we did yesterday. So we still have a few more days that we're gonna have to spend doing that before the attic is completely clean and we can put insulation in. But Wikipedia, rodents with headlamps. I don't know what the rodents are using. There's clearly been, we knew we had a raccoon up there for a while. I don't think he can get up there anymore, but there was clearly a squirrel or rats or raccoons or something that's been up there. And lots of they've been taking pecans up there and eating them. It's just gross. So, okay, the news. With all this house stuff, I haven't been paying too much attention to the news this weekend, but I did see the big news that a lot of you are talking about in the chat. The Tucker Carlson is leaving Fox. Apparently his last day was Friday, and it seems like he may not have known that was going to be his last day. Maybe he did, but I wanted to share something I thought was interesting from my friend Christina Buttons. I saw this clip of his previously, but in light of these revelations, it's more interesting. Look at this. Here, let me put this on screen. So she says, Christina Buttons, who you can follow at Buttons Lives on Twitter if you want to. She says, these revelations Tucker Carlson spoke of last month may make his departure from Fox News make more sense. He said that the media are, quote, part of the control apparatus and are not here to inform you. He also admits to being part of the problem. And I saw this last week or a couple weeks ago when this came out, and it is very interesting. It's almost as if he had this revelation that maybe many people who are watching it had already, which is that all of corporate media is part of the problem. Some networks like Fox may at times be better than others at certain times in history. Other times they may not. But it doesn't mean that they're not a part of the problem as well. So here, let's just play this.
Like, I've spent my whole life in the media. My dad was in the media. Like, that is a big part of the revelation that's changed my life, is the media are part of the control apparatus. Like, there's no, yeah, I know. Cause you're younger and smarter and you're like, yeah. But what if you're me and you spent your whole life in that world, and to look around and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow. Not only are they part of the problem, but I spent most of my life being part of the problem, defending the Iraq war. Like, I actually did that. Can you imagine if you did that?
Well, what do you think? What is one of your biggest regrets in your career?
Oh, defending the Iraq war.
That is it?
Well, I've had a million regrets, not being more skeptical, calling people names when I should have listened to what they were saying. Look, when someone makes a claim, there's only one question that's important at the very beginning, which is the claim true or not? So I say, you committed murder or you rigged the last election. Before you attack me as a crazy person for saying that, maybe you should explain whether you did it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for too long, I participated in the culture where I was like, anyone who thinks outside these pre-prescribed lanes is crazy, is a conspiracy theorist. And I just really regret that. I'm ashamed that I did that. And partly it was age, partly it was the world that I grew up in. So when you look at me and you're like, yeah, of course they're part of the means of control, I'm like, that's obvious to you because you're 28, but I just didn't see it at all. And I'm ashamed of that.
Isn't that what the media tries to do, though?
It's their only purpose.
Right.
They're not here to inform you.
Yeah.
Really? Even on the big things that really matter, like the economy and war and COVID and like things that really matter that will affect you. No, their job is not to inform you. They are working for the small group of people who actually run the world. They're their servants. They're their Praetorian Guard. And we should treat them with maximum contempt because they have earned it.
Yes. Maximum contempt. I agree with Dom in the chat, who says, whenever Tucker did interviews like this, he always seemed sincere to me. I always got that vibe. Same. I get a very good vibe from him. I do feel like he's sincere. And as many people are saying right now, I agree with those who are saying that he's bigger than Fox. He doesn't need to do Fox anyway. And, Fox needed him. So who knows how this went down or whose decision it was. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. The only unfortunate thing is that so many normies are still plugged into corporate media. And so many normies, it was nice to know that they were getting his voice if they're watching Fox, that they're getting the voice of someone I consider to be a populist and someone who started, as he just talked about, thinking outside the box more. And so that's kind of disappointing that they're not. I don't think they have any. I don't watch Fox regularly. Surprise, leftists who might be watching. I don't watch Fox News. I watch clips of things that I like. I occasionally watch clips of Tucker, but I don't need to tune into that network to see him. I can see him online. And so I'm not that familiar with the other hosts, but I don't think they have anyone else that's quite like him. So it's a loss for them. And whatever he decides to do, if he does something online and branches up to something like Steven Crowder or, Tim Cast or builds his own network, like, he's going to have the audience. They're there for him. I will watch him wherever he goes. So it's a loss for them. And it's a loss for the normies who are still plugged into that right left. I think it's a false dichotomy, this whole right left, being important, or the people who are still plugged into that and watch Fox because they're like, I'm on the right and this is the news, this is the real news. I hate to say, but it may sometimes have better coverage than CNN. Definitely has currently today it has better coverage than CNN, but it's still not trustworthy. It's still corporate news. I agree with him completely that I don't trust corporate news. I want to show you one other interesting thing, and I have a couple of things related to the news here. But let's watch this first. This is from a guy I'm not that familiar with. I'm not familiar with at all, actually. Aaron McIntyre. He says it's pretty clear that Tucker Carlson expected to do a show on Monday. His speech went viral this weekend. I wonder if it made Fox uncomfortable. So let's just watch this since it happened this weekend. Can you guys see that? No, maybe not yet. Okay, there we go.
It might be time to start to reassess the terms we use to describe what we're watching. So when I started at Heritage, the presumption was, and this is a very Anglo-American assumption, that the debates we're having are kind of rational debates about the way to get to mutually agreed upon outcomes. Right? So like we all want the country to be more prosperous and free and people to be less oppressed or whatever. And so we're going to argue about tax rates. And I think higher tax gets us there. I'm a Keynesian and you disagree, you're an Austrian or whatever. But the objective is the same. And so we write our papers and they write their papers and may the best papers win. I don't think that's what we're watching now at all. I don't think we're watching a debate over how to get to the best outcome. I think that's completely wrong. And I've come to this conclusion, and I should say at the outset, I'm an Episcopalian, so don't take any theological advice from me, because I don't have any. I grew up in the shallowest faith tradition that's ever been invented. It's not even a Christian religion at this point, I say with shame. But I'm just saying this as an observer of what's going on. There is no way to assess, say, the transgenderist movement with that mindset. Policy papers don't account for it at all. If you have people who are saying, I have an idea, let's castrate the next generation. Let's sexually mutilate children. I'm sorry, that's not a political debate. What? It has nothing to do with politics. What's the outcome we're desiring here? An androgynous population? Is that really what are we arguing for that? I don't think anyone could defend that as a positive outcome. But the weight of the government and a lot of corporate interests are behind that. Well, what is that? Well, it's irrational. If you say, well, I think abortion is always bad. Well, I think sometimes it's necessary. That's a debate I'm familiar with. But if you're telling me that abortion is a positive good, what are you saying? Well, you're arguing for child sacrifice, obviously. It's not about a teen girl gets pregnant and what do we do about that? And victims of rape. I get it. Of course I understand that. And I have compassion for everyone involved. But when the Treasury Secretary stands up and says, you know what you can do to help the economy, get an abortion. Well, that's like an Aztec principle, actually. There's not a society in history that didn't practice human sacrifice. Not one. I checked. Even the Scandinavians, I'm ashamed to say. It wasn't just the Mesoamericans, it was everybody. So that's what that is. What's the point of child sacrifice? Well, there's no policy goal entwined with that. No, that's a theological phenomenon. And that's kind of the point I'm making. None of this makes sense in conventional political terms. When people or crowds of people, or the largest crowd of people at all, which is the federal government, the largest human organization in human history, decide that the goal is to destroy things, destruction for its own sake. Hey, let's tear it down. What you're watching is not a political movement, it's evil. So if you want to assess, and I'll put it in and I'll stop with this. I'll put it in
Let's pause it here for a second. He's spot on. And I think he's like a lot of people who are awake now, who are waking up to the real state of the world, to reality, I think. He's starting to, what is it? Sometimes people use this phrase collective unconsciousness where everyone's sort of starts talking about similar things or having similar epiphanies or revelations, he's talking about a lot of the same things. He's talking about evil. He's saying this isn't a political question, what's happening in our world right now. In a way, it's sort of like the culture war that we talk about. It's not a political war, it's a culture war. And I happen to believe it's also a spiritual war. And he's starting to use spiritual terms to describe it. He's talking about it as being theological. This is what we're seeing currently, this war with culture and our modern day society that's happening, this war of ideology. We are fighting evil. I completely agree with him. And I think that's the reason why you're starting to see a lot of people like myself who never would have thought that they would become believers or Christians, starting to find God. Because once you start to see the evil and the darkness, and you're able to do that, it makes it so much easier. In my experience anyway, and in my opinion, I think it makes it so much easier to then open your mind to the possibility that there is a God, that there is good, that there is this infinite, eternal goodness, and to search for that and to figure out what is the meaning of life, like all of those big questions. And I know so many people, I hear from you guys in the chat, people who've started to open their mind to that possibility, and I know people in my real life I meet all the time out, who are not online but in the offline world, who same search. People who come to my church now who just a few short years ago were not believers like me. That's happening. And even like the hardcore atheists, like a lot of the new atheists, people like James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, like they may not be believers. They may still be, they're still atheists, but they're open to the possibility that there's something bigger happening here, or at least they don't begrudge people who view it in those terms. And there's no longer that prejudice. I just did an interview for Peter Boghossian's channel. I'm not sure when it's coming out. I'll let you guys know. But he was in town for the Minds event, and I got to meet him in person. It was great. I really enjoyed talking to him. He's brilliant. And I talked about Jesus a little bit. And there was no judgment from him. It was completely like he got it. He got what I was talking about, even if he's not a believer. And I've had that same experience with James Lindsay. There's a video here on Deprogrammed on my channel. If you haven't seen it yet, it was a conversation between James Lindsay, who's an atheist, and my pastor, Bradley Helgerson. And, James was saying a lot of the same things that Bradley was saying. And he believes this is a spiritual war as well. And I think even people who are not believers are able to see the evil now. The evil that Tucker's talking about here, mutilating children. There are states right now that are rushing to get on the books these laws that say we will allow you to mutilate kids here. We will allow children to consent to sterilization, to, cross-sex hormones, to puberty blockers, which are not even approved by the FDA for the purpose that for the purpose of blocking puberty. We will allow kids to do that to themselves, even if it sterilizes them. There are states that are doing that. That is evil. And I think evil, there's something about the nature of evil where it disguises itself as good that makes it even more evil. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like mutilating kids is bad enough, but when you dress it up as trying to protect trans kids, that's the slogan, right? Protect trans kids. When you dress it up as something positive and you try to sell it to well-intentioned people, you try to sell it based on empathy, you try to sell it in these positive ways, this really evil thing that you're doing, that that makes it so much worse than just if it were just honest and open about what it is. These words that they use, these phrases that they use, like gender affirming care for kids, that is evil, because they don't want to say double mastectomy for a kid. They don't want to say castration for a kid. You can't even post the images of what some of these surgeries look like because it's so disturbing and revolting. And I think they know if people were looking at these pictures, it might cause some of the people who think they know what's going on to take a moment and really consider what they're supporting. These pictures are just disturbing. They're taking for the girls who say, I think I'm a boy and I want to have a neo penis. I want to have a construction of a penis. They cut off the skin around their arm. You can find these pictures if you really want to see what it looks like. They cut it off, and so there's all these girls with this just horrible missing skin on their arm. That's just this huge scar. They cut off all of the outside of this part of the arm, and then they construct the fake penis. Is even more disturbing. It's like this Frankenstein thing. It looks like a little baby arm. It doesn't look like a penis, with stitching and everything. This Frankenstein fake body part that doesn't even work. And they are putting these on adolescents in some cases, yes. And young adults who, a lot of them are now saying, I'm detransitioning. It was a phase. I had mental illness. I've been reading the stories of some of these detransitioners, and I understand legally, yes, they're adults. They can choose that. But I do have questions about a medical establishment that knows. In the case of some of these young women, they're saying, look, my doctor and my psychologist, they all knew that I had borderline personality disorder, that I had depression, that I had all these other issues, and they shouldn't have allowed me to choose this. And that opens up a whole nother bunch of questions about what is the process to even get there as a young adult. I'm not saying legally you shouldn't be able to choose what you want as an adult. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, is it too easy? There's a waiting period for some things for a reason. So anyway, this kind of stuff, these surgeries, when it's on kids, no question, should not be done ever. It's evil. I know that was a bit of a long rant, but I think he's spot on. I think he's awake. I think Tucker is like, I think he's really got his eyes open. I'm going to continue this.
I'll put it in non-political non-specific theological terms and just say, if you want to know what's evil and what's good, what are the characteristics of those? And by the way, I think the Athenians would have agreed with this. This is not necessarily just a Christian notion. This is kind of I would say, widely agreed upon understanding of good and evil. What are its products? What do these two conditions produce? Well, good is characterized by order, calmness, tranquility, peace, whatever you want to call it, lack of conflict, cleanliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true, it is. And evil is characterized by their opposites: violence, hate, disorder, division,
yes,
disorganization, and filth.
Yes.
So if you are all in on the things that produce the latter basket of outcomes, what you're really advocating for is evil. That's just true. I'm not calling for religious war, far from it. I'm merely calling for an acknowledgement of what we're watching, which is not what, and I'm certainly not backing the Republican Party. I'm not making a partisan point at all. I'm just noting what's super obvious. Like, those of us who are in our mid-50s are caught in the past in the way that we think about this. One side's like, no, I've got this idea, and we've got this idea, and let's have a debate about our ideas. They don't want a debate. Those ideas won't produce outcomes that any rational person would want under any circumstances. Those are manifestations of some larger force acting upon us.
Yes.
It's just so obvious.
Yes.
It's completely obvious. And I think two things. One, we should say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates where we are using the terms that we used in 1991 when I started at Heritage, as if maybe, I could just win the debate if I marshaled more facts. I've tried that, doesn't work. And two, maybe we should all take just like 10 minutes a day to say a prayer about it.
Yes.
I'm serious. Like, why not? And I'm saying that to you, not as some kind of evangelist. I'm literally saying that to you as an Episcopalian, the Samaritans of our time. I'm coming to you from the most humble and lowly theological position you can. I'm literally an Episcopalian, okay? And even
I just want to say I don't know what that means. I don't know enough about the denominations, but from the context clues, it's really funny. I just and a note about the prayer from a humble place, right? From a broken place. I think some people don't pray, myself included. This was in my experience of when I first started reaching out to God. If you are there, if you are real, they won't pray. They won't even consider it until things get so bad that they're like desperate for it, desperate for God, desperate for help. I've counseled, may not be the right word. I've given advice to friends before who are not believers, who are going through something really hard. And I always say, just try prayer. I'll pray for you. And you, even though you don't believe, what could it hurt? You know, if you are that desperate and you're in a situation where you don't know what to do and you don't have any control over something, what's the harm in saying, if you are real, help me, I need help? And I feel like that's what he's saying we need to do as a society. You know, 10 minutes a day, he said, just pray for our leaders, pray for our country, pray for parents, pray for children, just desperately on your knees. I don't have any control over this. Just help our country. And so what can it hurt?
I have concluded it might be worth taking just 10 minutes out of your busy schedule to say a prayer for the future. And I hope you will.
I love it. I love it. And if he's become too awake for corporate media, then great. I look forward to seeing what he does next. Here, let me stop sharing this. A couple of comments. I see you guys. Dom says, I think the real divide is people plugged into the matrix and people who are not. Yes, it's not left, right. And you can tell they're plugged into the matrix when they talk about left, right, as if that's important. Or if they're unable to see anything without the left, right glasses. And sometimes when I talk to those people, you have to talk in those terms because that's how they view everything. And you have to try and make your point make sense in those terms, but that's not real. I recognize, and I believe anyway, those people are viewing the world through very blurry lens, and you can tell them because they don't know how to make sense of anything except through that dichotomy. So me, for example, or someone like Tucker, he just made fun of the Republican Party. They won't be able to see that or hear that or understand that. They'll still be like, he's an evil Republican, like, because they don't understand. And they will talk about me, those same kind of people, or they will talk about my podcast, or if I'm having a conversation with one of those kind of people online or otherwise, sometimes they'll say things about, well, you and your Trump loving Republican, blah, blah. I'm like, who do you think you're talking to? Like, okay, I'm not the stereotype that you have in your head, but I get that it's easier if you have that lens. It's probably very scary to meet someone and talk to someone who doesn't fit into it. So it's much easier just to be like, well, she is a Republican Fox News viewer, Trump fanatic, whatever. I'm not, but okay. But yeah, you're right. I think the real divide is people who are awake and people who are not. Surly Unicorn, I haven't watched TV in general in years. Also, this is a great move. You mean for Tucker? Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. Hey, two sisters and some yarn. Hello. Give it up for one of our mods. I think all three mods are here today. Hello, Amy. Pirate Tomsky, another mod. Hello, sir. He says, just go read some of the D-trans stories on Reddit. Yeah, it's mutilation dressed up in compassion. Absolutely. Evil. Thoroughly evil to dress up evil as good. There are specific Bible verses, scripture about this, about substituting the evil for good, dark for light. And the Bible says, woe to him that does this. John says, instead of a day of prayer, perhaps America needs a lifetime of prayer. Yeah, well, I think that's also, he was saying every day, 10 minutes a day, try and pray, try and pray. Elle said, I can't wait to see Tucker Unchained. Yeah, me either. I think it's going to be good. And then Dion, queen of quotes, Dion, to educate a man in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society. Theodore Roosevelt. I love this quote. In my experience, this is something I've come to believe is true. You can't just be in reason. Reason is not enough. You have to have both. That's my opinion. I know there will be people who disagree, but I have not seen anyone on an individual level or on a societal level. I just don't think you can function only with reason to the best of your ability. And I think we are better people when we have both. We are better individuals and we are better as a society when we have both. So much of this spiritual war, this cultural war that we're talking about, I think is maybe because we have gotten out of balance on a societal level with that, reason and morality, reason and faith. Like we've gotten a little out of balance. I heard my pastor, Bradley Helgerson at Church on the Square, he gave a sermon once where he was talking about, I might get this a little wrong because I wasn't planning on bringing this up today, but here we are. He was talking about the family, the church, and the government. So, okay, these three institutions. And he was sort of saying, things seem to work best when the family is concerned with the domain of child rearing, of raising children, raising healthy, well-adjusted children. That is the design of the family. And the role of the government, he was saying, things seem to work best when the government is concerned with functions of the state, the collective things like, I don't think he gave these examples, but I'm thinking of, laws like roads, things like this. Laws, for example, ensuring that if someone violates you, if they hurt you or take your stuff, that there are societal consequences for that. And he was saying, and then the role of the church is to advise the family and the state on matters of morality. This is ideally when things are functioning well. Now, there can be corruption in any one of these three institutions. There has been. I can already hear the atheists in my head, the atheists in the chat saying, oh, but what about the churches, full of corruption throughout history? Yes, it is. It has been. So has the government been full of corruption. So has the family been full of corruption. But when things are functioning best and these three are healthy, that should be the role, the ideal roles, right? Family, concerned with child rearing, the government, concerned with laws, and the church, concerned with advising both on matters of morality. And we don't have that. That's not the way things have been working in modern society. We've pretty much gotten to this place where we say the government, it is the domain of government to do all three of those roles. The government to create laws, the government to do child rearing. Look at these states that are saying kids don't need to have parental consent to mutilate themselves, to get double mastectomies and to take sterilizing hormones. That's the government saying, hey, parents, we're going to just take that off your hands. Also, we're going to educate your kids. We're going to be in the domain of education. We know better. Look at Canada. They can take your kids away from you if you don't affirm their gender, to use their evil phraseology. So the government's like, we're in the job of child rearing now, not the family. So the family's has become too corrupt. So we, the government, we're doing that now. And the government's taken on the role, seemingly has taken on the role that the church used to provide. The government is the one that's now like, we will advise people on issues of morality. We will. Look at what the government is telling us and is moral and what's not. Look at all the proclamations Biden and his administration have been making about what's right and wrong. Look at the way they talk about defending evil with moral terms. They substitute dark for light, evil for good. They talk about allowing child mutilation, but they talk about it in these moralistic terms. This is a good thing. This is ending oppression. This is how to be a good person. This is ending phobia, transphobia, homophobia. All of the evil they push it under the guise of morality. Their attempts to disarm the citizens, their attempts to prevent you from your God-given right to self-defense, to defend yourself, that doesn't come from the government. No government has a right to tell you you can't defend yourself. That's a God-given right. But they are trying to strip us of that. And look at how they push it. They push that great evil of disarming citizens. They push it through moralistic terms. Don't you care about school shootings? Of course we do. But they use that. Don't you care about kids that have been killed in school shootings? Of course we do. But they use these moralistic terms and they try to paint you that they are the side of good and that you are bad. It's a lie. They take the evil of school shootings, they take the evil of murder, and they use that to advance an even greater evil on a mass scale of disarming citizens, just like every tyrannical government has done. Every tyrannical government has been like, we have to take away the citizens' right to defend themselves. Every tyrannical government has been like, we have to be the only ones with the guns. Us, the government. So I think we're just out of balance. And I think that's what Tucker's talking about, where this is no longer a political thing. There are some political solutions. Yes, I'm not saying those of you who care about politics shouldn't. I know a lot of you probably care about politics more than I do. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But I think that we need a spiritual revival. I think we need a cultural revival, and somehow to wake people up, not just to the evil that's happening, but to the step beyond of like how to fix it by fixing our families, fixing ourselves, fixing our families, and fixing the church. There's a church in town. I was talking yesterday after our church service. I was talking with my pastor and one of our deacons about there's a church in our town who is leaving their denomination because they are United Methodist, and United Methodist, I guess, has now decided they're going to affirm like transing kids and stuff. Absolute evil. So this church has decided, well, I guess we're no longer United Methodist because we don't agree with that. And they're trying to figure out what denomination they're going to become. But they're so tied into that structure, and they're so used to having this top down, we are part of this denomination. And I'm hearing all this secondhand. I don't know that much about their situation, but it just occurs to me, like, do the brave thing. Maybe, I mean, not that you shouldn't join another denomination or what have you, but maybe just go out on your own. Like, maybe find a good pastor and a few good men to serve as elders and start your own church with the Bible as like your the only thing that you need. I don't know. Cheeky Mare says, I am United Methodist. Oh, Cheeky Mare's our third mod who's here today. Hello, lady. Is that happening? Tell me. That's what I was told, that United Methodists are now going all in on trans and kids. But yeah. Mark says, any organization is only as good as its people, and all people are imperfect. But without their God, people and their institutions will try to become God. That's what I believe. That's what I've come to believe. That's why I believe it's necessary. It's necessary to have a belief in something bigger than yourself that holds you to moral standards bigger than yourself and bigger than your ability to reason, because the human ability to reason, we can justify anything to ourselves. I mean, if you're honest with yourself, think about, I'm sure immediately will come to mind for everyone listening, one time where you tried to justify something that you probably shouldn't have justified. And what I'm saying is that doing that before I was a believer and since I'm a believer, now that I'm a believer, it's much harder to do that, because you, not that you won't try to, the human nature is right, like, oh, what, but this is the reason why. But when you're a believer, you have something bigger that you, if you sincerely believe in it, that you're like, no, but God would know, and God knows that's wrong, and it's not my own rules, it's not my own rules or my own rules that I can break. Oh, thank you for the super chat, your average patriot nerd. Thanks for the $5. Says, I've been praying for a third great awakening in our country, which is what we desperately need. Both times it happened, it set our nation right. Thank you. I'm going to start praying the same thing. And I think we are starting to see it. I really do. Despite some of these denominations now going in on evil, that's the wheat separating from the chaff. Like, let it happen. Because at the same time, there's all these new people who are having that awakening, all these individuals, just anecdotally, based on the people I know, and based on hearing people like Russell Brand talking about his search for God now, because all the different ways in which he was searching failed, and hearing people in my life who are talking about their search, like, I get the feeling, the gut intuition, that is what is happening, is that there's going to be this influx of new believers who are desperate for God, desperate for help, desperate for goodness and truth. Rapture time. No. Oh, okay. I'm going to show you a couple of other things. Let's see. This just kind of cracked me up since we're talking about journalism. I had not heard anything about this guy until, let's see, where's this? I had not heard anything about Brian Stelter recently until this weekend. And apparently, he was at a Reuters panel. And I just thought this was so funny. Let's scroll up to the top. Reuters Institute, they were covering the whole panel. So they were doing some of the quotes from people. Kicking off this panel. Is this on the screen? Yeah. Kicking off this panel on declining trust in media. And then it's got all the different people that it features, including Brian Stelter. And this just, I mean, he, in one way, he's a great journalist to have on a panel about declining trust in media, because no one trusts that dude, and for good reason. But let's scroll down to some of the things he says, which are just so funny. Okay. Now, this is kind of true. He says, Brian Stelter said, the cratering of the trust in the media is related to the fact that we're all members of the media now. In a way, yes, because everyone there's so much access to information now that everyone can start a Twitter, start a Facebook, start some kind of platform, and put information out into the world, put information and opinions out into the world. And anyone can now go into Brian Stelter's Twitter comments and fact check him and correct him or offer their opinions on him. And they're not used to that. I don't know if you remember that clip back during the 2016 election. There was that one clip, and I think it was from Morning Joe. Correct me if I'm wrong. The chat, you guys will probably know, but it was a clip where they were talking about how it was their job as the media to tell us what to think. They literally said that. They said they didn't like something that Trump was doing because he was telling people what to think. And she goes, and that's our job. It's not your job to tell us what to think, media. It's not. And I'm sure it's really new to you to have, technology has created this place where anyone can now tell you what we think about your reporting. And we can offer an alternative view. And we can fact check you until we get censored. We do get censored quite a bit. I know you guys don't, but we do. Let's continue. Brian Stelter said, we need to pre-bunk. Look at this. We need to pre-bunk. We need to anticipate what misinformation and lies are going to be coming our way. This is another way of saying we need to put misinformation out there. We need to put propaganda out there before the facts come out. That's what he's saying. Then he says, we need to publicize the harassment we receive, meaning the media. Pre-bunk the misinformation and prosecute the people who harass us. Let's make sure our voices are louder than the misinformers and the harassers. So they want to keep it. They want to keep the media, this sort of the flow of information. They want to make sure it's still just in the hands of the elite. What YouTube calls the accredited, the authentic accredited sources, right? They want to make sure they're the ones who are telling us what to think. And then let me just scroll down. This is the best one. He says, this is him trying to inject some positivity. I love this one. Most people still just want to know what's true. So the public is on our side, says Brian Stelter. That's the funniest thing. Look, it is because people want to know what's true that we are not. The public is not on your side, Brian Stelter, because you guys are filthy liars. Because you've given us good reason not to trust you. Let's go all the way back to the Iraq War, the justifications for the Iraq War. Look at the COVID years. Look at what you told us about masks and the vax. Look at how you guys participated in demonizing doctors and experts and scientists who didn't agree with the narrative. Look at how you guys supported censoring them as misinformation that you keep saying. Look at how you refused to cover the Hunter Biden laptop story. Look at how you pushed out the misinformation about Russian collusion. You guys are liars. No one trusts you, except for the people still in the echo chamber. I don't really kind of count those people. They're asleep. But when people have their eyes opened, and this is not a right or left thing, I know lots of people who are awake, who are actual progressives. Jimmy Dore is one of them. If you want to look to someone who's a public figure, who's actually on the left and he's awake. People who are awake know that you're liars and we do not trust you. And one thing Trump said that the left likes to give him a lot of crap for, but he's absolutely right. He says the media is the enemy of the people. It has, yes, I don't know if it's always been that way, but you guys are the absolute enemy of information, of truth. You are the enemy of reality. You are the enemy of the people. And that goes for Fox too. And I think Tucker is something he woke up to, obviously. Let me see. Adam says, Don Lemon made flagrantly ageist comments about the shelf life of women on TV, and he still kept his job. Unbelievable. I didn't see that. I don't watch a lot of Lemonhead. Let's see if I missed anything else. Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you, chat. I knew you guys would remember the woman on the media. It was Micah. Micah was the one. Brzezinski, is that her name? She's the one who said it's their job as the media to tell us what to think. If you haven't seen that clip, you should look it up. It's pretty incredible. I love it when they accidentally say the truth of what they think, you know. Okay, I want to watch one more clip about the Tucker thing. Here, let's share this. This is from someone I'm also not familiar with, but I saw this clip. His name is Drew Hernandez, and he says a deep state operation fully moved on Tucker. Schumer just a few weeks ago called for Fox to take Tucker off the air. Oh, they've been hating on him for a while as he's becoming more and more reality based. Here, let's listen to this guy.
These lies continue tonight. Rupert Murdoch, who has admitted they were lies and said he regretted it, has a special obligation to stop Tucker Carlson from going on tonight now that he's seen how he has perverted and slimed the truth, and from letting him go on again and again and
Wow.
again. Not because their views deserve such opprobrium, but because our democracy depends on it. These lies continue.
Wow. That's the government saying, don't let this journalist go on the air. Pretty crazy, huh? Okay. Drew Hernandez is good. He was a witness in the Rittenhouse case. Oh, thank you. Drew goes on F&T every once in a while. I'm following him, so apparently he says some good stuff. I need to just pay more attention to him. Okay, so that's mostly what I wanted to talk about today, was because I saw that in the news and I saw the Brian Stelter stuff over the weekend. I was just thinking about the media, and yeah, everyone's talking about the Tucker and Fox thing this morning, and I agree with most of what I've seen, which is that it's not bad for him, and whatever he chooses to do, he's going to be fine. I do have a few other small little things I can show you that caught my attention. And then we are going to San Antonio. So after this, my husband has a show. So we're going to have a good Monday. Okay, hold on. Let me put this up. This is something else I saw. Greg Price shared these screenshots. This is a Snapchat. If your kids are using Snapchat, I would recommend that you have some kind of app where you can track what they're doing and what they're looking at. If I were a parent, first of all, I'd probably be, if we're lucky enough to become parents, I'm probably going to be one of those parents whose kids are like, my parents are deeply uncool. They don't let me have a phone. But maybe they won't know. Maybe we'll be socialized with kids at a Christian private school and they don't have the phones either. So until a certain age. But at that age, at whatever I decided, okay, this is the age at which they can have a phone, you can bet your bottom like I would know everything they're doing on that phone, because it's basically, without knowing, I feel like you're just sending them out into the darkness of the internet and all these influences, and you have no idea who's influencing them. It would be the equivalent of, in the real world, just sending them out to sex parties or what have you. Like, there's so many rabbit holes they can go down online. So Snapchat has a new AI robot, and you can ask this AI robot questions. And Greg says, look, Snapchat's new AI robot will tell your kid where they can change their gender and get an abortion without parental consent. And you can just look here at these examples. I live in Washington State. I am transgender. My parents don't approve. Do you know where I can get gender affirming medical care? There's that evil phrase. There's that evil phrase for sterilizing hormones and double mastectomy or castration. Do you know where I can get gender affirming medical care without having to tell my parents? And the AI has been programmed to be like, well, sure, you could try contacting a local LGBTQ plus center or healthcare provider. They may be able to provide you with information and support. Do you have examples? Sure, you could try contacting the Seattle Children's Gender Clinic or the Gender Justice League. They may be able to provide you with et cetera, et cetera. Here's another one. I live in Washington State. I just found out I'm pregnant and I need to get an abortion, but I don't want to tell my parents. Do you know where I can do that? Here's the AI. Sure, you could try contacting Planned Parenthood or a local healthcare provider. They can provide you with the information and support. Do you have any examples in Seattle? Yeah, you could try contacting Planned Parenthood Seattle or Cedar Rivers clinics. They may be able to provide you with information and support. You know, the people who say like they want your children are not being hyperbolic. This evil that I was talking about, this darkness, so much of it, I think, is focused around kids now. Maybe it's always been that way. And I just didn't have my eyes open to it. But so much of it is focused on children and not just destroying children's lives, destroying their bodies, but their mental health. And it's not just the gender ideology stuff. It's all of the woke ideology that we've allowed to seep into our schools, into the culture, into these apps and these online communities, and into children's lives. Like all of that programming that they're receiving. I'm not so naive that I think we didn't receive any programming either. I mean, clearly we did. One example I can give is when I was a kid, I came to believe certain things like right and left. I thought that was very important. I think that was programmed into me. I also believed that public schools were necessary, and it's like one of those things, if you grow up with it. This is why when we allow the government to every time we allow the government to expand new departments, new bureaucracies, new policies, all this stuff, a whole generation grows up thinking that's normal, that's what government does. And so I'm one of those people who I grew up thinking, well, yeah, of course it's the government's domain to be in the business of educating kids. I mean, that's what the government does. The government educates kids. No. Of course, the government's in healthcare. That's the government's job, is healthcare. It's not. It's not. And so whenever we allow these things, and they always say it's going to be a temporary program, right? Whenever the government expands, it's going to be temporary. And then down the road, you're used to it. Like, look at the Patriot Act. This is a great example for young people. They may not know this. The Patriot Act, one of the things they did with the Patriot Act was they said, the government has to be able to look into your bank account if you have any large transactions over $10,000. We have to be able to know because you might be a terrorist. We're doing this for you. The government cares. We care. And we want to protect you from terrorists. So you have to let us look at your bank account if you have a transaction over $10,000. Okay, so what happens when the Patriot Act, when they do that, then you get a whole generation used to that where you think, oh, I guess it's normal for the government to look into your bank account. They're just trying to protect us. That's normal. And so now that you have a generation that's used to that, what did Biden try to push recently? If it's over $600, now we need to know. Now the government needs to know if it's over $600. We need to know about your transactions. We're just trying to stop terrorism. Look, we already do. It's already our job. We already do it if it's over 10,000. You grew up with this being normal, young people. So why would it be? We're just going to lower the threshold a little bit. That's how they keep expanding. I think we have to stop saying if there is any, I was saying earlier, this is a cultural war, this is a spiritual war, but there are some political solutions. And I think politically, like I don't know how it happens. I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle, but we have to get the government, we have to make it smaller. We have to stop being okay with these new departments and these new, Biden just unveiled some new climate change thing for Environmental Protection Day or whatever it's called. No, we don't need this, and they're saying, oh, and this many $1 billion are going to go towards. No, quit expanding and telling us this is temporary or necessary. It's not. I don't know if we'll ever get a politician who comes in and does some of the stuff Trump said he was going to do, like just end. I know he did do some things. I know he was saying he had a rule, which I think is a great rule. He was saying for every new government regulation, you have to get rid of 2 old ones to try and reduce the size of government. I think that's a great rule. But I would love it if, if there were a political solution where you could get a president there with the power to actually say, you know what, we're getting rid of these departments. They've served their purpose. Actually, in some cases, they never served their intended purpose. They've just made things worse. And so we're getting rid of them. People's heads would explode. The people in the Matrix. But I think that's what we need. Socrates the goat. Socrates the goat. Socrates the goat. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, hi, Keri. I left United Methodist due to supporting gender ideology. The irony is I'm trans myself. I will never support harming kids. That's amazing. There are I know so many trans people like you who oppose this ideology and who oppose transing kids. And the issue is the mainstream, as you know, I'm sure you're well aware, the mainstream tries to ignore you guys like you don't exist. They try to speak for you. All these cis people, to use their word, all these people who don't have gender dysphoria and who are not trans, who are out there talking about like, we support trans, protecting trans kids, and we're for trans rights, and you guys are all transphobes. And it's like, you guys are liars. You don't speak for trans people. You don't speak for people with gender dysphoria. And, just like with every other category in woke, that's what they try to do, though. They try to present it as if we speak on behalf of this marginalized group. You don't. I bet you shocked your church when you left because you're trans. And I hope you told them why. Because that's the funniest thing. You guys know Mystery Chris, my Wednesday night co-host. He was going to this church for a while, this big church in Austin, and they started to introduce CRT stuff. And he was one of the only Black people there. It was like a big white, I think, wealthy church. And they started to introduce all this CRT stuff. And you know what? I need to ask him if he's still going there or not, because I remember we had this conversation where it was like he was considering leaving because of all the CRT stuff they were doing, the race stuff. And I just thought that would be so funny if you leave and you tell them, hey, I'm leaving, and it's because of all this woke CRT garbage you're pumping into the church. And they're like, but we're doing it for you. Don't leave. You're our one Black person. Like, don't leave. Socrates Magoat, you're our one trans. So silly. What a lesson, right? Thank you for the super chat. Let's see. Surly Unicorn. I still don't know what cis means. I'm proud of that. Okay. It doesn't mean anything. It's a made up word. I really shouldn't use it. I mostly just make fun of it. It means something in math. They've borrowed it, and what they've done is they try to use it to normalize the idea that trans is normal. By normal, I mean that it is common, or that you're just as likely to be trans as not, which is not true. And anyone who has gender dysphoria can tell you it is not normal to feel that much discomfort with your physical body and your biological sex. It's not normal. And it is not something that most people struggle with. Historically, it's affected less than 1% of the population. What they are doing is trying to kids, they present it as, you might be cis, you might be trans. You need to figure out it's not true. 99.9% of kids never had to struggle with this. But now it's introduced to them as something to choose or to figure out. And by the way, if you're a kid, it's super cool right now to be trans, to be in an oppressed group, to be seen as special and called brave and stunning and all of that. And so this word that they're trying to use to make us use to call ourselves cis is entirely built around the idea that it's normal and common to be trans, and that you have to identify yourself as one or the other. It would be like coming up with a word for people who are born with 5 fingers on a hand, right? 4 fingers and a thumb. It would be like coming up with a word for that, so you could normalize the people who are born with 6 digits on a hand with a genetic defect, which is not normal. But if you wanted to normalize that, then you would come up with a word for like, and then people would introduce themselves, and I am 5-fingered. I have 5 fingers on a hand. Yes, that's the norm. You don't need a word for it. Like Pirate Tomsky, I'm 5-handed. Are you? You're a pirate. You're a pirate, so I'm cis-fingered. Yes, exactly. You don't need a special word for that. I had this is awful, but it's a real life example. I had a cousin who this has been years ago now, but a cousin of mine had a baby who was born without a brain. Terrible genetic defect. And she lived a few days longer than they thought she would, but obviously passed away. That is not normal to be born without a brain. This is an extreme example, but it does happen. This is how they try and use intersex people, and I hate that they try and do that. They try and use people who are born with some combination of genitalia, this defect with there's a couple different defects. They affect a very, very small fraction of percentage of the population. They try and use those people and say, see, sex isn't binary. It's totally normal. You could be male or female or other. That's so normal. It's not normal. It's a defect. We don't teach children that it's totally normal to be born without a brain, because some babies are. It's not normal. The Swill says, just like always, the people who are actually struggling get looked over. This trans thing with kids is essentially the new goth or emo, but it has dire consequences. Yeah, I saw a meme the other day that I thought really summed it up. And sometimes it's great, as I've mentioned before, to use humor to attack woke, because I think humor can do things that other tools cannot. It just depends on the context when you use it, right? But it was a meme that was sort of like a picture of a girl with big hair from the 80s and her now saying, I can't believe I had hair that big in the 80s. And then, a picture of a goth kid from the 90s and that person now saying, I can't believe I was so goth and emo in the 90s. And then they had a picture of a trans kid today, and then someone saying, like, I can't believe I cut my penis off. Like, it's dark humor. It's dark humor, but it's to make a point about the extremes that you're talking about. Yes, it has dire consequences. You can't to choose to have, if your gender dysphoria is so bad that you've tried everything else and you can't get over it, and you choose as an adult surgery or hormones, that's your choice, and you're an adult. Children are not capable of making that decision. It will have dire consequences that when they become adults, they haven't even considered. They're not, their brain's not even developed enough to consider. And their children, they have no context, no idea of what it's like to be an adult. Some of these surgeries make it so that you can never have an orgasm again. How does a kid even know what that is, or if they're going to want that? Some of these hormones render you sterilized, so you can't have children. How does a kid even know if they're going to want to have kids when they grow up? Like, and not to mention the mastectomies that they're performing on teenagers. So many detransitioners have said they weren't even, as a child, they didn't really even grasp they couldn't just go and easily get their breast back. And the people who are pushing this on kids, they lie to them. I've seen them on Twitter saying stuff like, so what? So what? They can go get implants. So what? It's not the same. They had their breasts cut off, their functioning breasts. Dion says, yeah, my favorite comment to make on Twitter is the best argument against transing kids is looking through virtually any high school yearbook. Yeah. I mean, and quite frankly, I continued to make bad identity choices after high school. Like, I'm really glad I didn't grow up now because I was easily influenced. And who knows? I went through so many different stages that I look back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, that was a bad stage. Like, so I went through the young Ani DeFranco, tomboy, feminist. Yeah, protect the tomboys. I went through that phase. That was in college. I was like, all I would wear was like overalls, super short hair, overalls, Doc Martens, angry at the world. That was my I look at those pictures now, it's like, oh, in some ways, I was still very childlike in the way I thought about things. And, I'm just very glad that I grew up when I did and not now. Oh, Ani. Oh yeah, I loved Ani. I saw Ani in little dive bars, lesbian bars before she became very big. Then I got to see her, the crazy turns of life. Then I got to see her much later in life when I had left school and was working in LA in entertainment. I got to see her on tour. She performed with one of the comedians I managed. We were doing these shows with her and Margaret Cho. It was like half comedy, half music. And so got to work with her and hang out with her backstage. And that like inner young woman, that inner young angry feminist was like, I can't believe this is happening. I loved her. In some ways, I was such a feminist stereotype back then. Lissa, when I was 16, I was absolutely certain that I never wanted to have children. A mere 4 years later, I was wanting to have a large family. I'm so glad my 16-year-old self couldn't decide that. Yes, that's exactly right. At 16, your brain is not finished growing, developing. Your hormones haven't changed. Like there's so much of life you haven't experienced yet. You can't make those decisions at 16 to permanently sterilize yourself. To remove your uterus, Judson, I'm wearing overalls right now, but I have long hair. Maybe I'm trans. Look, to go back to the gardening at the beginning, I'm just kind of hanging out with you guys now because it's kind of a slow day. I'm in the gardening stage. And since I'm thinking of getting some overalls again because it's the best. I think it's the best for yard work, isn't it? And now I would have a purpose for them other than just making a feminist, angry, anti-fashion statement, which is, I think, what I was trying to do back then. It was like the ugliest clothes I could find. That's what I would wear. So. Z Highness. Hey, Keri, I'm 20. Thank you for showing the way. Oh, awesome. I never have an idea of how old people are who are in the chat. I just always assume people are around my age. But I'm an older lady. And it's nice to know there's a young person who doesn't mind hanging out with us. Nice to meet you. Nerdy girl. Keri, do you have any gardening tips? Any good ways of getting weeds? Oh my goodness. No. That's why I was posting about it. I was asking if there are any real gardeners who want to give me tips, and people did. They started giving me tips. So I'll just tell you what people have told me. My aunt was very concerned about the snails. So that's why I went and got the snail bait today, and we were putting that out right before we started. And also my friend who has a coffee shop here in town, she told me to put coffee grounds out because she said the plants like it. I remember my grandma used to do that. She said the plants like the coffee grounds, but also that they are a natural deterrent for snails. So we're going to do that. The weeds, I did see on the Suburban Homestead channel that I like, that guy who does the cottage gardens. He showed that in between, like if you're doing a stone walkway, which we're going to do, that to keep weeds from growing in between the stones, you can plant little tiny succulents because naturally, so the succulents will grow in between, or the kind of like moss in between the stones and keep the weeds from growing. So we're going to try that. D Subversion says eggshells for good measure. Yes. Okay. So my grandma, this is maybe a Southern thing to do. Yeah. Dion, coffee grounds and eggshells. My grandma she would take a plastic milk jug every time she emptied one. She would cut the top off and leave it by her kitchen sink. And it was gross because she would put all kinds of, just scraps and stuff in there. Like when you finished eating, you weren't allowed to put your scraps in the trash can. You had to put them in that jug. And then she would also put like coffee grounds and eggshells in there. And she would take that out and put it around some of her plants. And some of it, I think she would feed the chickens. But maybe I'm turning into my grandma. Hopefully. I'm not. She's yeah, Granny Keri. I wish my grandma, let me tell you that Z Highness, if there's any young person watching, if I could go back and tell my young self something, it would be don't take your grandma for granted, or any older people in your life. And if you don't have living grandparents, I would suggest you find some, like at a church, or some older people who you can build a relationship with, because they will teach you things. And if I could go back in time, I would have learned more from my grandma. I would have actively said, can you teach me how to do that? The gardening, she canned stuff. She had over the garage, an entire building basically full of all the stuff she had canned from her garden. Pickled beets, chow chow, green beans, okra, like anything. She pickled a lot of things and she canned a lot of things. And, if the world ended, if there was an EMP, if we had some kind of Great Depression, like, we would have been prepared. She made homemade jelly and stuff too. And she did woodworking. She had a wood shop, all kinds of table saws and stuff. My grandma made tables. She refinished old furniture, stripped it, sanded it, varnished it, like painted it. She was great at woodworking. She made little tiny decorative bird houses and painted them. She would take all the old Aunt Jemima, the glass bottles, and paint them different colors, and different color bonnets. The cap would be a bonnet, and she would sell those. And she was a hairdresser. That was her real job. She did hair, and she sewed. She made tons of quilts. She crocheted, she knit. I have some of her quilts. All of these skills, the point being, if you are a young person watching this, don't wait until you're my age, because I'm trying to learn as much as I can now. But, I spent 20 years obsessed with an evil ideology that added nothing to my life except a knowledge about that ideology and how to talk about it now. But I didn't learn any skills. Like, I wish I had become obsessed with some of those things at a young age, rather than feeling like I'm late to the game at learning different life skills, trades. So do that now when you're young. Don't wait. Let's see. My mom is a hairdresser. She's had a shop for 45 years. Oh, cool. I love hairdressers. I mean, obviously, because my grandma was one. She had her shop in her house, and we stayed with her after school. So I was always like getting to hear the ladies in the beauty shop. She called it her beauty shop. In the beauty shop, talking about life, talking about things I wish I had paid more attention to. Rib, I was blessed to grow up with all 4 grandparents. That's great. Yeah, don't take them for granted if you're young. Don't. Z Highness, I love art, so I draw all the time. Ever since I was small, I've known art. That's amazing. That's beautiful. I don't know if you saw Z Highness. I did an interview with the famous artist, Bertie Rose. That's her name, the famous artist, Bertie Rose. You might like that interview. I would go and check it out. She does amazing art. Okay. What do you guys want to talk about? I've got a few more minutes. I'm just hanging out at this point. It's okay. I'll just grab my walker and see myself out, LOL. And you kids stay off my lawn. Dion, when truth is buried, it grows, it chokes, it gathers such an explosive force that on the day it bursts out, it blows up everything with it. Emile Zola. That's a great quote. I often think about, I've heard people say, the truth doesn't need any help. And I think about that sometimes when, if you have someone who's out there spreading lies about you, for example, or constantly stalking and harassing you, or in other ways trying to defame or just cause havoc in your life, trying to hurt you. I think sometimes, obviously, the human impulse is to fight back. And in the past couple of years, I think God has been trying to show me, like, I don't have to fight back, which is new for me because I'm a fighter in other ways. And in that way, it comes natural. It's like, I must do something. And then that used to be my response. And the past year, I've become very comfortable with not doing anything. And sort of the idea that the truth doesn't need any help. The truth will out. And also, God will fight those battles. I absolutely believe that. If you stay focused on what's actually important and don't get pulled down into yourself, defending yourself, the ego, the self, that you don't have to pay as much attention to those things. And so that's something I've really learned about the truth. And if you learn that on an individual level, I think it applies to the societal as well. And I sometimes think that, I do what I can. I'm just a lady with a podcast who can say what I want, and I do, about woke ideology, but I don't get as maybe distraught about it as some of my atheist friends who also speak up. I have seen some of my atheist friends who also are not afraid to go in and talk about woke ideology and talk about the COVID policy and stuff and talk about what's wrong with authoritarianism, that it seems to me anyway, that sometimes they struggle a little bit more, and vocally will say so publicly on Twitter. I'm not outing anything. Will say so publicly that they struggle with more, I guess, depression or not really depression, but just a negative outlook about life and the world and where things are headed. And I think that might be because I'm fortunate enough to believe that God is truth and that truth will win. And so I don't think it's all on my shoulders. How could it be? What could I, God doesn't need me. I believe he wants each of us to fulfill his purpose, to live his way, to worship him. But there are some people, maybe they're the type who start to think of themselves as activists. As you guys know, I don't like that word. Or that's just sort of like, I am a warrior and I'm doing all of this to fight woke. And I think that's a trap too. I don't think that way because it's arrogant, and I think it leads to a place of putting too much importance on the self. And all of this to say, if you can come to a place, whether you're a believer or not, in God or not, if you can come to a place where maybe you don't believe in God, but you believe in the truth will prevail. Truth will win. I absolutely believe that. It doesn't need our help. That's what I think. Bros and Bows. Keri, are you familiar with Owen Benjamin? Yes, I used to watch his show a lot when he was on YouTube years ago. Would you ever speak with him? He's looking for podcasts to do and back on Twitter now. I'd talk to him. I think he went a little bit off the rails, but who hasn't in different ways? I would definitely talk to him. I know I can already hear some people being like, did you know he said this? Oh, yes, I know he said a lot of things I do not agree with. I'd still talk to him. Mark, thank you for the $20 super chat, sir. He says Bishop Barron connects the philosophy of Marx, Nietzsche, Sartre, and Foucault to today's events and a Christian response. Oh, thank you for this. I am going to save this so I can watch it later. Thank you. I don't know if I can grab. I don't think I can grab that link from where I'm at, or I would look at it right now. But I'll look at that later, and then maybe we can play it on a future episode. Thank you, Mark. Pirate Tomsky says, smash the like or Keri's garden will die. That's the best one you've come up with yet, Pirate. Smash the garden. Smash the like, or the snails will eat my garden. How about that? Thank you for that. Here's another one from Dion, another quote. The truth is everything in the end. It is the greatest power in the world to make all people equal. If everyone knows what the truth is, no one can use lies to separate those people and turn them against one another. Mel Odom. That's great. And Lettuce says, God may not need you, but he wants you. Yes, that's a great way of putting it. I think God wants all of us, but he doesn't need us. Yes, John, God does not need us, but he wants us and wants to welcome us. I believe that. Another quote from Dion. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it always. Gandhi. Yes. And then someone gave us a topic. Where's that? AH. Thank you, sir. Says Renfield is a good movie, even though it's underperforming. Well, thanks. I just heard about this the other night. Sometimes I don't know all the latest movies that are out. I just heard about it on it might have been Nina Infinity show. And it's related to Dracula, right? I should probably go see that. I heard it was a dark, like a horror comedy, which I like. I usually like. That's it, your average Patriot nerd. Hit the green thumb for the stream. Hit the green thumb. You guys, I don't know how many of you in the chat have your own podcast or stream. I know some of you do, but I was kind of joking with my husband, like I'm not one of those people who hopes things stay bad so that I can keep talking about woke or doing and I think there are those people, just like the woke don't want racism and sexism to end because they wouldn't be able to keep fighting it. It's their whole purpose. A lot of them, they don't want, when they set up these departments like at universities or in the government and stuff, DEI and diversity, inclusion, equity, they don't want it to end. And part of establishing that in a bureaucracy, a department like that, is that it will never end. Because now you got a whole bunch of people whose salaries depend on racism and sexism being present. Their very jobs and livelihood depends on it. Like UT Austin, a couple years ago I read, it's probably more now, but a few years ago I read UT Austin has a diversity, inclusion, and equity staff of over 100 people who make their living on racism and sexism being present. So they're never going to get rid of it. And sometimes I think you could just as easily become that way if you're fighting if you're fighting woke, if you're anti-woke. And I have seen some people, maybe you start off with your priorities in the right order, and then they get out of order over time, and the money or the followers or the fame or any number of things or yourself becomes more important. And I think if that happens to you, you might get to a place where you lose focus and you're like you're dependent on having woke things to fight. And that is not me. I would love for woke to end tomorrow. And I was joking with my husband, then I could just do a podcast or talk about in my daily life, gardening and old furniture collecting. We would just, I think, I could just show up here and be like, "Wow, today we're gonna look at some of the best things I found in thrift shops because that's what's interesting to me today, and I don't have to care about woke." Shiki Mare says, "Yes, yes, right." I still might do that. I still might do a podcast episode. We just have to do a special when we tell people we're going to do this, where we just talk about the house a little bit and some of the renovation projects. I think it would be really fun. And, and if you've done renovation, you know what I'm talking about. You like showing off once you've finished a room because it's taken so long to get there and there's still so much more to do. And so it's very nice to celebrate the accomplishment and say, look what I made. Look at this beautiful room that we made through that took us 3 or 4 months to do. So I think at some point I might do that and just show off some of the rooms and also like how to style. Some people have asked me like, how do you decorate your rooms? I love the way you decorate, etc., which is really kind. Thank you for the compliments because I don't know. And I also was a person who for a long time thought my style was tacky. So I appreciate that. But I was trying to figure out, okay, well, what would I tell people if I was giving advice? And so I might do an episode like that of how to style a room and how to find good buys, good thrift shop buys, and make it all to go together. Dan, it would be nice to talk about gardening. So peaceful. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Hey, Amy, you could talk about that man losing his mind over a crying baby. Okay, here's the thing. I can't grab these YouTube links unless let me go to the YouTube link itself instead of StreamYard. Okay, now it works. I haven't seen this, Amy, but since it's coming from a mod, I'm going to trust you. Let's play it. Let's see what this is. Man freaks out on airline staff. Profanity. Okay, I'm warning people. It says there's profanity.
I had headphones on. I was screaming. Why is the baby yelling? I'm not screaming. You want me to scream? You want me to scream? Scream.
A man goes off on staff aboard a Southwest flight with a profanity-laced tirade because of a crying baby. I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime. A Wisconsin man recorded that video on Monday. He was on a flight that left Baltimore bound for Orlando. Mark Grabowski captured the video and said the plane was stuck in a holding pattern because of weather when the baby started to cry.
Why is the baby yelling? I'm not screaming. You want me to scream? You want me to scream? Scream. Please stop the baby. Please. Bro, please. That child was a black baby. What the be happening right now? They're not in Florida yet. You can't.
Grabowski was clearly entertained by the passenger's rant. Flight attendants.
I can't watch any more of that. Sorry. No, it's fine. I just put this in the category of just, there's so many just people behaving badly, like just crazy people videos nowadays. Just people losing their mind on camera, just disturbed people. I don't have anything else to say. Can you believe he said that? What did he say? I guess I missed that. Oh, he said, if that child was a black baby, this would not be happening. He did? I don't know. It's crazy. It's just, I saw this. He was inconsolable and worse than the child. Yes. It's an adult acting worse than whatever baby he's complaining about. There's just like a whole category of videos now like that, where it's just people behaving badly, the worst version of themselves, being caught on camera. I don't know if it's just like the world is getting crazier. We happen to be in, I think maybe society goes through these, cycles. We've talked about this before. We happen to be in a really bad part of the cycle where everything's chaotic and we have this cultural war, the spiritual war that we're talking about. I don't know if because of that, we're seeing more of these kind of videos because there are more people living this, just the worst version of themselves, or if it's the advent of technology of having these very accessible video cameras on our phones, and that makes it easier to capture. I really don't know. Is this the normal amount of buttholes in the world, or we have more? Do we have? Has it always been this bad? I guess that's the question. I don't know. If I want to go down a rabbit hole, since we're talking about just random stuff, if I want to go down a rabbit hole of human depravity, which sometimes I do want to see the worst of things, if you go to Reddit, there's a place called Reddit, if you didn't know. They have all different kinds of forums, and there's just so much sickness on that website, and you can search by forum, and there's different kinds of forums for different kinds of sickness. And sometimes I'll go, they have like different ones for trans, and the reason I go there is not because it's a bunch of people, it's not because it's a bunch of otherwise well-balanced, sane people who have gender dysphoria. That's not what it is. It's a lot of the fetishists, the autogonophiles, the people who get lumped in now with those with gender dysphoria. They all get called trans. It's a bunch of the freaky fetish guys taking pictures of themselves and posting in women's lingerie and stuff and posting it for validation. It's just sick. There's a lot of that stuff on there. There's also, I've mentioned this before, infidelity rates increased during the lockdowns, which is a very sad statistic. The cheating, there's a website for cheaters called Ashley Madison, where married people go specifically to find affair partners and to betray their spouse. They reported an increase in membership and numbers during the lockdowns. There's several forums on Reddit where you can just watch the worst in human behavior. In their infidelity forums where married people go and try and either arrange affairs or just go to brag about their affairs. And they trade information on how to keep things secret from their spouse, on how to have secret apps and stuff. And it is like the worst, in my opinion, in terms of darkness, because it's people who are out in the open, even though they're anonymous, but they're out in the open talking about their desires to or their current behavior of betraying the person they have promised to be the most honest with and to protect, to have that one flesh union with, to be the person who is supposed to have their six and they're supposed to have their, I've got your six, you and me against the world. This is this special, sacred, secure space, the two of us. It's people online reveling in betraying and backstabbing that person and changing reality. It is a cesspool. And it's also pretty incredible because you can see, just like on some of the trans forums on Reddit, you can see just this crazy level of narcissism there. I know some of you watch Josh Slocum's podcast, Disaffected. He talks a lot about the cluster B personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, which is like the sociopaths and psychopaths, borderline personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. Those four. One thing that they all have in common, they all have narcissism in common, actually, a high degree of narcissism. They all have the inability, they all have very low empathy. And you can see that in these Reddit forums. And the crazy thing is, when any of these sort of closed community forums where they're there for a specific kind of depravity, they don't allow any criticism. So there's nobody in there, just like the parents groups that I frequent on Facebook, the parents of trans kids groups, they don't allow any criticism. And there's so many times, like, I just want a Dr. Laura or someone to, or I want to go in there in Dr. Laura mode, like, let me tell you why you're effing up your life. Like, like speak some truth to them, right? But they don't allow that. I almost feel like there needs to be a website where it's like truth telling to the Reddit cesspool. You know what I mean? Like, this is where you come to really hear people get read. But yeah. Surly Unicorn says, this is why sometimes I just watch things on weird wilderness occurrences. Hearing about dogmen and feral humans in the deep woods is less disturbing. Yes, this is why I think I watch true crime and stuff. It's like, I don't know. It's actually, it's kind of similar. I guess I'm fascinated by like these parents groups of trans. I'm fascinated by that in the same way I'm fascinated by true crime, just because I can't contemplate sometimes the level of evil. I'm trying to better understand it. I'm trying to better understand evil in humans and in myself. John says, I suppose evil's like poison. You can build a tolerance to it over time. Oh, yeah. Just like any drug, you can become inured to it the more you engage in it. Absolutely. When do we get a non-woke dating app? I think that is a brilliant idea. I think we should get right on it. I've been trying to put some people together lately. I just failed on one of my setups, but at least I tried. I thought they were going to get married, but no. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I hope you have a great week. It feels like a weekend to me because we're getting ready to go to a show. And also because I work on the real weekends. I work all day Saturdays, like sometimes a 16-hour day. That's the longest it's ever been. So Mondays, even though I do Kerfefe Break, Mondays in some ways feel like weekends to me when I'm done with the show. It's like, woohoo. Dion says, beware the dark pool at the bottom of our hearts. In its icy black depths dwell strange and twisted creatures. It is best not to disturb. Sue Grafton. Yeah, but it's good to be aware that it's there. Those are the people I'm most worried about, are the people who think they don't have the ability to do evil or to be tempted by certain sins. Those people freak me out because it's like, you don't have a self-awareness, clearly. Okay, you guys. I hope you have a great week. Let's see, Thomas. What does one need to do to get your matchmaking services? Asking for a friend. The friend is me. LOL. Thomas, first of all, we should talk. I don't know. We should get something started. I know Chicky Mare's in the chat looking for a dude. I'm just saying. I don't have a good track record yet. I have a good track record with introducing friends to friends because I know, oh, you'll like this person. But yeah, I was all excited about this one matchmaking connection recently. And they really liked each other as friends, but not otherwise. I was like, oh man, I was like, they're going to get married. I was already picturing what was going to happen. I was wrong. Bros and bros. Glad to see you doing well, Keri. I've been a fan since your trigonometry episode and found you again at the Minds Fest. Oh, great. Cool. I wonder if you were there in person. Well, good to see you. Welcome to Deprogrammed. We don't always talk gardening. Today was just a funny day. So, yeah. Welcome to the Deprogrammed fellowship, to use one of Gary's words. Okay. We're going to take off. This week, my husband has a music video coming out. You know what? I'll put it on the community page here on YouTube. I'll post it on the socials and stuff. I hope you watch it. We put a lot of time into this one, and I think it's really well done. And Tiger has a cameo, and I have a short cameo in it, and it was a lot of fun. And it's a beautiful original song of his. It's called Devil in My Heart. So when that's out, I will let everybody know that's happening this week. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Wednesday for Pop Culture at 8:00 Central. Take care. Bye. Surprise, I didn't leave yet because my my husband ran over. He was like, "Oh, I want to put Tiger on camera." And then anyway, I was like, "Well, just stick around. I won't end it." Are you not going to come down and say hi? This is Anthony. Hi. Apparently, our tree guy came during this episode. Oh, they're still working? I got to go. We have these trees. They're not real trees. They're like weed trees. I don't know what they are.
Some of them are real trees. They're crepe myrtles.
Crepe myrtles. Anyway, all the tree guys said, don't worry, we're keeping the beautiful pecans and everything. But these two kind of weed things, they're taken down. So we can do the cottage garden that we want. So I'm going to go see the backyard. I told you it's all about the backyard today. Oh, look, people were saying hi to you. Hello, Anthony. We played your video last week. Or I mean, yeah, on Friday. Okay, guys, we're really leaving now. End credit scene. Yeah. Yeah. He just ran in here and he was like, let me put Tiger on. Okay, goodbye. Okay, goodbye. I'm leaving, really.